Chapter 21 United Front. The flags were set in symmetrical order. Syndicate first, then the US, then the shared Lunar Alliance banner made of fractured rings around a torch. All of them fluttered in the faint, artificial breeze inside the American lunar capital's primary press dome. The bombing had been 3 days ago. The morning was still fresh. The hymns still hummed through the halls of the embassy like echoes that couldn't find a wall to land on. Now came the politics. Ezra stood with the others along the press line, formal robes dark and neat. He recognized half the officials at the podium. Ministers from Harmony, a few American Space Force commanders, a pale-faced analyst from a European station who looked like he hadn't slept since the blast. In the middle stood a Syndicate liaison, calm, sober, but clearly trying to hold the tone of a unified message. This morning, we confirmed the presence of Red Pact-linked elements in the false identification protocols used by the attackers, the liaison said. We believe this attack was coordinated by rogue mercenaries seeking to undermine our joint efforts. A hush passed through the gathered press. Cameras blinked like insects. Let it be known, this was not an attack on one people, but on all peoples of peace, and we will not fracture. Ezra watched Jackson's closely. She stood to the right of a Space Force colonel, fully uniformed, boots polished, face still as stone. She didn't blink. She didn't shift. When the U.S. rep spoke next, announcing enhanced cooperative protocols and a temporary extension of U.S. authority over shared drone corridors, Ezra thought he saw something twitch in her jaw. Not outrage, just pressure. Like she was holding up an invisible weight with her spine. The agreement passed without objection. The U.S. would temporarily share oversight of patrol paths, including areas where the Syndicate's Seraphim drones operated. The reasoning was clear: tighter control, faster response, shared technology. But to Ezra, it sounded like a leash, softly offered, tightly drawn. As the meeting ended and the room began to clear, Ezra caught Jackson's eye. She nodded, and then turned away. The Marinega Strip was little more than a scar across the lunar crust. A long, narrow stretch of territory that barely kissed the southern edge of Syndicate land. Just a few kilometers wide at its thickest point, but it extended like a fingernail across unclaimed lunar rock, down into deep crater regions where most nations had no interest in settling. For the people of Marinega, that was the point. The AOL shuttle touched down on a worn pad, its hydraulic landing gear groaning under pressure as dust spiraled into the thin dome filters above. The outpost looked like something salvaged from the scrapyard of the first Mars mission. Cobbled domes, patched fiber sheets, one central antenna held together with thermal tape and prayer. A delegation greeted them with wide eyes and thin smiles. Their leader, a woman named Tari Bellin, wore a jacket that was obviously designed for Earth weather. Too thick, too padded, and her gloves were mended with twine. "We thought you were just rumors," she said. "Stories the children made up when they looked out past the dome and saw Syndicate lights on the horizon." Ezra stepped forward with a kind smile. "Then we're happy to be your proof." Inside the dome, the conditions were stark. No pressurized passageways, just flexible corridors that cracked when they walked. One child was wrapped in what looked like a heat-sealed emergency blanket, sipping from a cracked container labeled Soylent Almond First Gen. Micah winced. "We need to offload everything," he muttered to Rachel. "Now." They opened the cargo hold of their shuttle and began pulling crates, solar patches, thermal blankets, dried fruits, nutrient bars, water purifiers, even spare air scrub filters from their sleeping quarters. Whatever wasn't nailed down was brought forward. And then they hit the bottom of the stores. What remained was not food, it was punishment. Rachel held up a glossy silver pouch with golden curry ice cream slurry printed in looping executive script. Is this dessert? Micah checked the label. It says for refined palates only. Best enjoyed lukewarm. I think it's a threat. Jonah found a box of carbonated soup cubes and immediately dropped one into a mug. It fizzed ominously. Why does it sound like it's a lie? Eve sniffed a pouch labeled vanilla kale pudding and nearly gagged. This is penance in a bag. Naomi stared at the last container. A clear plastic cylinder with beetroot risotto pellets, now with texture. I don't trust a food that announces texture like a warning. And yet, when they served it, the people of Marinega accepted it like manna from the stars. Tari sipped her effervescent soup and smiled through watery eyes. We've never had anything that bubbles before, she said, laughing softly. It's like warmth that tickles. One child took a bite of algae caviar mousse, made a face, and then asked for seconds. Ezra offered a prayer over the meal, simple, gentle. We thank you, Father, for strange gifts. May even our crumbs carry your love. May our fellowship bring the light of your kingdom to this land. As they prepared to leave, Tari took Ezra's hands in hers. We have little, but you made us feel seen. That's more than food. That's communion. Ezra bowed his head. We'll come again, and next time we'll bring real food. Tari smiled. You already did. The flight back from the Marinega Strip was quiet. The crew had shared everything they could, including most of their own rations. They'd eaten stale algae bars and gelatinous calcium cubes for the trip home, but even Naomi was smiling, if faintly. Rachel leaned back in her chair, watching the stars slide past through the arc-linked viewport. That little girl with the thermal blanket asked if the soup fizz meant it had power in it, she said. Micah chuckled. Technically, she wasn't wrong. Jonah kicked off his boots and stretched his legs. You think they'll make it through the month? Ezra nodded slowly. They have faith. Faith and vanilla kale pudding. That got a laugh from Naomi. Eve even cracked a smile. But Jackson didn't laugh. She sat in the back corner of the shuttle cabin, helmet in her lap, gloves folded like a chapel offering on her knees. Her eyes were fixed on the monitor showing their trajectory, an idle loop of their return corridor flashing green. Jackson? Ezra asked gently. You doing okay? She blinked once, then turned her head just enough to acknowledge him. Fine. Just thinking. About? Guests, hosts, what it means to offer a place? Ezra tilted his head. You mean Marinega? I mean in general. On the moon, in the kingdom. Her voice had a calm, cool rhythm. Measured, but not cold. When we came up here, she continued, I thought we were building a stronghold. But I think maybe it was always meant to be a table. The others looked at her. Eve smiled softly. That's a beautiful way to see it. Jackson didn't respond. She simply turned back to the screen. But what happens when somebody at the table's lying? Silence. Ezra leaned forward, slightly. Is this about the press dome? About the drone protocols? She didn't answer directly, just tapped a rhythm on her gloves, thumb to knuckle, knuckle to wrist, wrist to palm, over and over. Finally, she said, Sometimes faith makes you loyal. Other time, loyalty makes you lie. I'm still figuring out which one I've done. No one replied, and Jackson didn't offer more. When they docked, she was the first to leave the shuttle. Not in a rush, not storming, just gone. Ezra watched the airlock cycle shut behind her. She's slipping, Naomi whispered again. Micah rubbed his eyes. No, she's already slipped. We just haven't hit the bottom yet. It was past lunar midnight when the ark buzzed. Jackson was still in partial armor, seated alone in her quarters. She hadn't changed since returning from the strip. Crumbs from an untouched protein bar dusted the table beside her. The message was short. Report to Command Room Theta. Clearance 7 Black. Immediate. She didn't reply, just stood, secured her sidearm, straightened her uniform, then left. Command Room Theta was 3 floors beneath the American Embassy housing unit. Tucked inside a low-pressure zone once designated for backup water reclamation systems. She keyed in her code. The door opened. Inside, darkness. 1 terminal, and Colonel Ryland, the same officer who stood beside her at the press dome. He didn't salute. Neither did she. Close the door. She did. Sit. She didn't. He didn't seem to care. He slid a data drive across the table. It's time you knew. She picked it up, slotted it into her arc, skimmed the contents. 10 seconds in, she stopped reading. You let it happen, she said softly. No, we saw it coming. We didn't cause it. That's a difference without a distinction. We needed cooperation. You were there. You saw how fractured the Alliance was becoming. Half the Syndicate Council wanted to restrict drone tech. Some were calling for full spiritual autonomy. It's unsustainable. So Mateo died to keep the mission on schedule? Mateo died because someone pulled the trigger. Not us, not you. But his death was opportune. She stared at him. And you want me to keep going? Yes, you're still embedded, and they trust you, which is more than I can say for most of your rank. They baptized me, she said. They washed my feet. Ryland leaned back. Then count this as your penance. She pulled the chip from her arc, set it down on the table like it was diseased. I joined to protect peace. And you are. You're holding the line between a church and a separatist government, between idealism and the real world. He stood, adjusted his cuffs. You've done well, Major. Just keep doing what you're doing. Smile, serve, stay close to them. We'll handle the rest. He left without another word. She sat down only after the door sealed behind him and whispered to no one. They're not the enemy. A beat. And I'm not the sword. She stared at her arc. The same screen that once showed her baptism verse now flickered with a new notification. Mission reassignment pending. New directive incoming. The olive lamp wasn't just a shuttle. It was a symbol. Built entirely in orbit from Syndicate-owned fabrication rings, the craft was long, modular, and precise. Its hull not designed for atmosphere, but for purpose. Every curve, every corridor, every system had been crafted by the 12 clans and their engineers. No marketing slogans, no unnecessary features, just beauty through function, and faith through craftsmanship. She's not fast, Micah said, as the Marinega family stepped aboard, but she'll outlast every ship in the squadron. Tari Balin nodded as she crossed the threshold. her hands clutched tight around her daughter's shoulders. "She smells clean," the girl whispered. Rachel smiled. "That's the eucalyptus scrubbers. We grow the moss in the ventilation system. It doubles as a filter and medicine." The tour was simple, humble, but impressive. Sleeping bunks that folded into walls, water reclamation stations powered by pressurized algae columns, grav ring corridors that used kinetic walk bars to stimulate earth weight in short bursts, a full chapel module, small, candle lit, open any creed. They passed the engineering node where Eve explained how turbineless heat dispersion used no fans, just phase static plates that vibrated at atomic levels. "Less parts, less noise, less things to break," she said. "More things to trust," Ezra added. Once they were in orbit, Jonah opened a viewport panel and let the Marinegas see the Earthrise, blue and green and impossible. Tari wept. Her daughter asked if it was real. "It's real," Naomi said. "It's still waiting for us to make it better." Later, seated around the community table, Ezra answered questions. A Marinega elder leaned in. "Your people don't build armies?" Ezra shook his head. "We build systems. We build homes. We build peace." Micah added, "We don't have tanks. We have the space elevator. That's our shield, our lifeline, our ark." "And if the elevator fails?" Rachel smiled gently. "Then we pray while we build another." The elder didn't laugh. He nodded solemnly. "Your ship is better than any embassy. It carries people, not power." Ezra looked down at his cup. "That's what we've always believed. Until the Lord returns, governments must prepare a place for their people. The Syndicate just takes that a little more literally." The olive lamp slid gently through low lunar orbit, its stabilizers humming with the soft thrum of perfect equilibrium. Inside the viewing ring, the lights had dimmed. A full panoramic screen opened across the walls, revealing the vast curve of the moon. Its gray plains dappled with craters, its fractured beauty stretching beyond what the eye could take in. For many aboard, it was the first time seeing the outside of the moon. Terry stood near the glass with her daughter, one arm wrapped tight around her. Their dome, the patched, flickering cluster of Marinega's central hub, was now only as a faint glint of solar shimmer tucked against the edge of a long crater. "We lived inside that?" the girl said softly. "All of that?" Terry nodded. Her voice was barely a whisper. "All your life, love. Until now." A boy, 8 or 9, stood near the center of the chamber, hand resting against the curved panel, like he could steady himself against the vastness beyond. Ezra approached gently. "First time off the surface?" The boy nodded. "I think so. I don't remember much." He paused, then looked up. "I remember a hallway and bunks. My great-grandmother had a cabin." Ezra crouched beside him. "On the elevator?" "Yeah. She was really old. They gave her a room with a bed. I wasn't supposed to go in there, but I did. Just once." A quiet smile. "She had these cookies," the boy said. "Oatmeal, with cream in the middle. Soft, so soft they stuck to your fingers. She kept them in a little tin and only gave them out when she thought it was important." He looked down, voice quiet. "She gave me one right before we docked. Said it was for courage. I've never had anything like it since." A small smile flickered. "It wasn't just sweet. It felt like love." Ezra's throat caught. He placed a hand gently on the boy's shoulder. That's what we came here to carry. Behind them, Naomi sat with the engineers, explaining flight paths and orbital corridors. Micah passed out warm water with freeze-dried citrus. Rachel listened as the Marinega elder asked about the villages in the Raoul district and whether they still sang psalms while they farmed. They did. At the edge of the ring, Jackson watched the stars. She hadn't spoken since they launched, not even when the boy talked about cookies. Ezra noticed, but said nothing. He didn't know it yet, but this was her last orbit. The meeting table aboard the olive lamp had become more than just a place to plan. It was communion, fellowship, strategy wrapped in service, the kind of table Christ might have flipped, or sat at and washed feet under. Ezra stood at the far end, arms folded as he looked over the map spread across the table. Rail lines, dome clusters, blank spaces, full of possibility. Now that the Marinega Strip is physically connected by train, he said, we need more than visits. We need presence. Until Syndicate leadership sends long-term families out here, we need to be the bridge. Jonah nodded. Then let us stay. Naomi and I are ready. Micah exchanged a look with Rachel. She smiled. We'll stay too. Build, teach, get things running. Ezra's eyes flicked to each couple, steadfast, rooted. Older and younger together. That's how strength is passed. Not through hierarchy, but through life. He tapped his arc and opened a connection to Rhea Lang. Rhea, he said when she answered, we've got a plan that might bless more than one nation. Rhea doesn't hesitate. Once she heard the proposal, an embassy near the rail to foster fellowship and spiritual outreach, her response was crisp. Absolutely. The council will love this. You'll have the prefab sent on the next supply shuttle. Use whatever's in Warehouse 19. Solar domes, green floor tiles, comm, scaffolding. I'll authorize a 2-month build permit, but you'll probably beat that in a week. Micah smirked after the call ended. A week's generous. We could throw a full dome over a crater in 3 days if the train hauls quick enough. Jonah laughed. You mean if we don't get buried in powdered soup bricks again? Rachel added. We once built a dome for a wedding in 48 hours. This time, we've got power tools and justification. The location they picked wasn't far from Marinega's heart. A massive, shallow crater just east of the rail stop. The crater was wide and smooth, perfect for a structural cap. Within days, the Syndicate teams would drop a pressure bubble over it, a prefabricated megadome designed to pressurize and seal in less than a week. It wouldn't be a city by Earth standards, but to the Marinega people, it would feel like one. A glass-roofed space with gardens, classrooms, sleeping quarters, and even market stalls. Like a mall-sized village that could grow down into the rock, and it would belong to them. The moment they see it, Rachel said, it won't just be shelter. It'll be hope, Naomi replied. Ezra nodded. And we'll call it what it is. An embassy. A place to receive the stranger as family. Chapter 22. Neighbor's Reach. The dust never quite settled. Even weeks into the build, a faint shimmer of regolith clung to every surface like memory. Solar loaders hummed as they moved crates between prefabricated wall segments and inside the dome. The smell of fresh insulation still mingled with recycled air. Neighbor's Reach was rising. Not fast, not clean, but real. The crater that once lay barren now held the faint glow of panel lights, the first rings of sleeping quarters, and a half-assembled mess hall where plastic chairs sat in uneven rows like a Sunday school lesson waiting to happen. Jonah leaned against a stack of tiles, hands on his hips, a smudge of grease across his forehead. He surveyed the dome overhead, 30 meters high, ribbed with support trusses, still missing 2 segments on the eastern edge. So many of these towns are popping up, he said, almost to himself. More every day. Will we have to connect them all? Micah, squatting nearby with a power tool in hand and a diagnostic pad in the other, didn't look up. Probably. That's a daunting task. Micah finally glanced over and grinned. Good thing we've got eternity. Jonah let out a slow, dusty laugh. Maybe we should start small. Connect this kitchen to the rest of the dome first. Rachel entered carrying a box of hydroponic starter kits, her hair tied up in a red cloth and her sleeves rolled to her elbows. She looked radiant in a quiet, grounded way. Her joy came not from comfort, but from purpose. Naomi's working on a shared pantry plan. She says if we rotate dishes between homes, no one ever feels like the guest. Micah raised a brow. So every house becomes the table. Exactly. She set the kit down and looked up through the dome's high curve, where the lunar sky loomed just beyond. This doesn't feel like construction. It feels like discipleship. Nearby, Naomi stood at a makeshift counter, arranging dried vegetables into neat rows, humming an old hymn under her breath. She turned when Jonah walked over and offered him a small thermos. Mint tea from the embassy stores, she said. Don't get used to it. He took a sip and smiled. We ever gonna get fresh mint down here? Give me a few months. He looked at her. Really looked. You happy? She nodded. More than I expected to be. I thought I'd miss the others more, but I feel like we're meant to be here first. He nodded, then looked back out at the main dome. We're the seeds. The main housing ring wouldn't be done for another 5 days. The market stalls were still just chalk outlines, but the mess hall glowed. The children's corner had mats and hand-painted signs. The dome held warmth. And soon the Marinega would come. Not as refugees, but as neighbors. As family. The dome had quieted. The last shift had shut down tools. Lights were dimmed to moonlight tones. Artificial gravity hummed low and steady. In the center of the empty mess hall, still smelling faintly of insulation and new flooring, the 4 of them sat cross-legged on unfolded mats. The stars outside the dome roof sparkled like breath through glass. Micah and Rachel leaned against each other, half wrapped in a shared blanket. Jonah had set a small solar lantern between them all, casting a soft glow. Naomi's knees, pulled to her chest, rested her head on Jonah's shoulder. No one talked for a while, just the sounds of tea cooling in mugs, the shift of fabric, a few distant clangs from cooling metal. Then Rachel giggled. Micah smirked and looked away. Jonah raised an eyebrow. All right, what was that? Nothing, Micah said, clearly lying. It was the fridge, Rachel blurted. The embassy fridge, in the middle of the night. Micah sighed. We were staying over in the guest wing before launch. I got up for some water and tripped the auto lock. Door slammed behind me. No clothes, no pass key, full moon and full exposure. Rachel was now wheezing. He had to ping Ezra on the Ark at 2 a.m. Jonah cracked up. Naomi just nodded calmly. That's happened to us. Twice, she said. Rachel blinked. Twice? Jonah likes midnight snacks, Naomi said, sipping her tea. Mint jelly and cheese, Jonah added with no shame. I don't bring my Ark when I'm raiding. They all laughed until the tea went cold. After the laughter softened, Micah leaned forward and cleared his throat. Honestly, I was worried about coming here, about doing this without the rest of them, about leading. Rachel took his hand. Me too. Naomi looked between them gently. So was I. The first time Jonah and I were sent out alone, I cried every night for a week. Jonah smiled, then turned serious. But God doesn't send us alone. He sends us together, and he goes ahead of us. Micah's eyes softened. Rachel whispered, Amen. Naomi reached into the satchel beside her and pulled out a thin scroll of laminated paper, a well-worn Bible study guide. She laid it on the floor between them next to the lantern. Let's read before we sleep. Jonah added, and pray for the Marinega, for the work, and for you two. Micah nodded. Rachel leaned her head on his shoulder. They all bowed. 4 voices, 1 spirit, under 1 light. The dome shimmered in the morning floodlights, its curved glass catching the silver pale glow of the sun reflected off lunar dust. Neighbors' Reach, though still ringing with construction noise and tool chatter, had grown teeth and a heartbeat. The food court, while surrounded by scaffolding and half-assembled stalls, was finished at its core. The seating was laid out in long, curved rows, modular benches arranged around a wide open stage, lit softly from overhead. Fresh cloth banners, stitched from the spare fabric by Naomi and Rachel, hung from makeshift beams, each marked with a phrase in old Earth script. Welcome, peace, light. A single kitchen pod, fully operational, had become a sort of hearth for the whole dome. It had fed workers for weeks, kept the crew fueled, and now it would welcome the Marinega. Outside, Land Rovers rumbled in, one by one, dusty and patched with field repairs. A few small Syndicate-made shuttles touched down in the crater nearby, hauling cargo and families alike. 500 guests in all. The new arrivals stepped into the dome wide-eyed. Many of them had never left their own colony. One young boy stared at the curved walls and softly lit ceiling with open wonder, whispering to his grandmother, "Is this what it looks like on Earth?" Down one curved corridor near the main dome, a small demo farm was already alive and chirping. Chickens fluttered, ducks waddled past heat lamps, and rabbits blinked lazily in their clear enclosures. A pen of sheep milled quietly in the back, their coats clean and combed. Naomi stood beside one guest, smiling as she offered a sample of fresh milk. "Sheep's milk, just chilled." "Really?" the woman asked, sipping. Naomi winked. "Tastes like ice cream when it's fresh." Inside the food court, quiet chords echoed off the walls. A quartet stood on the center stage, 2 on electric strings, 1 on a digital piano, and a vocalist with a voice like a soft bell. They played customary Syndicate lunar state music. Slow, reverent, somewhere between Appalachian gospel and ambient folk. The guests found their seats slowly, eyes watching the stage, hands brushing the table edges as if to confirm this wasn't a dream. At the front, Jonah and Micah stepped onto the stage together. Jonah held the mic first, voice warm and strong. "Welcome to our table. We built this dome with you in mind. It's not just a roof, it's a door, and it opens in both directions." He looked over at the gathered families, some in worn flight suits, others in colony garb marked with simple family crests. "We believe God made this moon not just to be explored, but to be shared. You are our neighbors now, not just by tunnels or trains, but by bread and song." Micah took over, a little softer. "We're not perfect builders. The kitchen's just one. The animals are still getting names, but what we have, we offer. and what we learn, we'll share. He smiled at the faces before him. We pray this will be the first of many meals, many domes, many friendships, and maybe someday we'll connect every settlement with light, with kindness, with peace. The crowd applauded, not wildly, but with genuine warmth. People looked around the dome as if seeing a second home form around them. Children giggled. An older man wiped his eyes. Naomi and Rachel emerged from the back with food carts, simple hot fare, bread and broth, greens and roast strips. And as the music swelled gently again, the first plates were passed out under the dome of neighbors' reach. The next morning, the dome buzzed with motion. Word of the meal had spread fast, through ARC messages, rover chatter, and old-fashioned word of mouth. By mid-morning, Marinega colonists returned in droves, this time not to sit and eat, but to work. They brought tool belts, patch kits, buckets, children holding hammer handles like they were swords. Naomi watched them come in from the ridge, hand on her chest. "They're coming to help," she whispered. Jonah nodded. "Of course they are. They've just been waiting for someone to build with." Supply trains rumbled in from the west tunnel, hauling prefab floor slabs, insulation foam, solar lattice panels, and even soil pods from Earth. Occasionally, a large shadow would pass overhead, and a cargo capsule would drift down, fresh from orbit, packed with materials too massive for tunnel freight. The town's design centered on the vast inner crater, now domed and climate-controlled. Its center was sacredly clear, a wide, open space planted with Earth's tallest tree seedlings, sequoias, cypresses, oaks, each one genetically optimized for lunar conditions. They would reach toward the dome like prayer hands. Above them, the Earth hovered in its waxing phase, a slow, constant reminder. You are growing, and not alone. The town's layout followed the curve of the ancient crater, but rose upward in graceful tiers. 14 concentric floors built into the inner wall like stacked balconies. Each level was connected by gentle ramps, wide staircases, and occasional lifts, allowing foot traffic to move fluidly up or down while keeping the central space open to the sky. It felt less like a base and more like a cathedral wall of life. From any level, you could stand at the railing and look down into the heart of the dome. A cleared space ringed with gardens, ringed again by walkways, all centered around young trees just beginning their reach toward heaven. Some levels already had completed housing units and working shops. Others were still skeletal frameworks, floors laid but walls unfinished, scaffolding leaning like folded wings. Naomi stood on level 5 beside a family from Peru, watching a construction bot weld a railing into place. "It's like walking through a library," the father murmured. "Only it's filled with life instead of books." Down below, children played near the seedlings. Even from here, you could hear laughter echo up the dome's smooth walls and catch the scent of warm bread drifting up from the lone working kitchen in the food court. A breeze, a real breeze from the air cyclers, carried soil and hope alike. Jonah joined her, resting a hand on the rail. "One day," he said, "those trees'll block the view." Naomi smiled. "Good. Then we'll have to walk down and see it for ourselves." Micah and Rachel worked together with a mix of Syndicate and Marinega youth, laying down fresh housing corridors on the second ring. A girl named Ayan from what used to be Somalia explained how her parents had sold their entire village's land rights to afford their spot on a pioneer shuttle. "We were told it'd be the garden," she said, laying tiles. turned out to be the desert. Others echoed her sentiment. Colonists from Brazil, Sri Lanka, Poland, and Mexico recounted stories of leaving broken places behind where they were promised would be a new nation. They said we could own land, said one man from Tennessee, wiping sweat off his brow. But we got plots on paper, not food, not air. But here now, there was food, there was work, there was soil beneath their boots. The Syndicate swarm, young adults who had never married, devoted couples, and gray-haired tradesmen alike, walked among them, not as saviors, but as neighbors. One of the older builders, a woman named Karis, handed a shovel to a Marinega teen and said, "You dig, I'll haul. We both sweat." Jonah stood at the edge of the open courtyard with Naomi. Together they watched as solar panels were hoisted onto new eaves, insulation packed into walls, and small herds of sheep released into the freshly cleared grazing ring. "We ever gonna build something this big again?" Naomi asked. Jonah smiled, hands on his hips. "Might have to. These people are showing us what kind of family they want to be." She nodded. "So we give them one." Neighbors Reach was no longer just a dome. It was a town with memory, a town with promise, a town with roots, a city in bloom. The town was no longer a concept. It was movement, sound, breath. Neighbors Reach blossomed across the crater like a garden in full surge, but with two distinct seeds. From the eastern quarter, where the Syndicate had first staked the great dome's foundation, the expansion followed an almost sacred rhythm. Walls rose like measured chords. Prefab units clicked into place like verses well rehearsed. Trams glided across polished lanes, their humming tracks already bordered by sapling-lined pedestrian paths. Young adults in matching utility suits carried tablet maps, calling out grid zones and power checks. Each new floor, added to the inner ring, echoed with intentionality. Wide ramps, engraved railings, space for scripture, for gathering, for light. Children skipped between deliveries and garden plots, their voices singing memory verses into the open atrium air. Trees in the central garden had already grown waist-high, and from the higher balconies you could watch their reach, upward and patient. Everywhere there was purpose, grace, design. But west of the divider, the world took on a different pulse. The Marinega quarter was growing like a fire in dry brush, fast, desperate, and uneven. Shelters of scrap alloy leaned at dangerous angles against the dome wall. Ropes hung between balconies as makeshift rails. Market stalls clung to whatever level ground could be claimed, selling old earth meds, solar bleached fabric, rehydrated noodles in foil pouches, and miracle lotions with uncertain ingredients. The air smelled of melted plastic and stew. In one plaza, two men welded together a solar water still with no gloves, using protective goggles made from tinted bottles. A child chased a rat through an open power conduit. Smoke curled from a stovetop fashioned from broken heat exchangers and fed with insulation panels stripped from construction debris. There was no symmetry here, only need. Yet despite the chaos, laughter still rose. Women brushed one another's hair and told stories. Elders leaned over railings to offer advice on building angle or slope. Children kicked around a ball made from cloth and tape. A mural was being painted, half scripture, half rebellion. It read, "We were promised more," and beneath it someone else had scrawled in chalk, "We will become more." From the highest tier of the atrium, Jonah and Naomi stood together, surveying it all. Micah and Rachel joined them, hands clasped. It's not what we planned, Jonah said. It's what they needed, Naomi replied. Micah folded his arms. One side was too much, one side was not enough, but somehow it's one city. Rachel looked toward the center, where a child on each side of the divider chased the same butterfly. One city, she said, still growing. The dome was alive. From the upper atrium rail, Eve could see the heartbeat of Neighbor's Reach below. A slow, steady rhythm of human movement and solar glow. Beneath the wide glass ceiling, Earth hovered in its first quarter, casting its blue sheen across the town's central plaza. Syndicate-built pathways curled outward in clean arcs, connecting bakeries, water stations, clinics, and garden plots in concentric order. It was mid-morning. Children tugged carts through sunlit lanes. Elders gathered beneath vine-wrapped trellises, reading aloud or teaching scripture in small circles. A girl in a yellow jumpsuit sang hymns while tracing chalk spirals along the stone, her voice echoing lightly against the dome's interior curve. Rachel rested her hand on the balcony rail. It looks like home. Jonah stepped beside her, eyes narrowed as they scanned the edge of the plaza, where the order began to fray. There, past the canal's midpoint, the terrain changed. Structures gave way to scaffolding and salvage. The Marinega Quarter, once a narrow refugee stretch, had grown threefold in just weeks. Plastic sheeting, reflective insulation, prefab shells, even dismantled rover frames had been stacked and shaped into dwellings. Laundry lines crisscrossed the alleys. Smoke from packet stoves curled upward through vent tubes stuck into old ventilation grates. A boy, maybe 7, approached a Syndicate water station at the perimeter. He didn't turn the spigot, just pressed his palm against the cool metal and stared. A moment later, his mother called, and he drifted back into the chaos. Jonah exhaled. That's the second time I've seen him do that. He's memorizing what free water looks like, Rachel said softly. Dr. Serafina adjusted the lamp over her makeshift exam table. The border clinic, built in the shell of a converted supply depot, was packed. Every bench along the curved wall held a patient, most of them children, most of them coughing. She knelt beside her next visitor, a girl with skin the color of cinnamon and lips that had begun to shade blue. Amaya? Serafina said gently. Can you sit up for me? The girl didn't speak. She raised her head, just barely, then slumped again. Her mother held her shoulders. The girl's fingers trembled at the joints. Have you noticed her breath catching in sleep? Serafina asked. She sits up most nights, the mother says. Says the dreams chase her breath away. We thought maybe it was bad food or the cold air. Serafina pressed a sensor to Amaya's temple. Her arc buzzed in response. The display dimmed, shifted to red. Blood oxygen was dropping too quickly for comfort. Sing for me, love, Serafina said. Anything you like. Amaya nodded faintly and began to hum. A halting, tuneless thread of melody. Her throat fluttered. Her chest rose unevenly. Serafina stood, her jaw tightening. She's in early stage JPAS, juvenile pulmonary atrophy. It's rare now. We catch it early in most Syndicate births, but out here... The mother's eyes widened. Is she dying? No, Serafina said. Not if we act now. She tapped her arc again, pulling up inventory logs. There's a nano-valve ventilator in storage at Eden Orbital. It came up with the latest shipment 2 nights ago. Earth-made, new model, perfect for her weight and lung profile. So, we can get it? The mother asked, already rising. Serafina hesitated. The next approved cargo drop for the clinic is in 12 days, and that's assuming nobody reroutes it again for military prioritization. The mother's hope deflated. She can't wait 12 days. No, Serafina said quietly. She can't. Back in the atrium, Ezra listened as Serafina relayed the diagnosis. Around them, the sounds of laughter and trade echoed, but his focus narrowed to one breath. One little girl. We'll speak to Trap, he said. Captain Trap? Naomi asked, looking up from her arc. He's docked now? Cradle Wing 7's in berth, Serafina confirmed. He'll be offloading rare mineral samples in 6 hours. Non-critical cargo isn't on his docket. But he's a privateer, Jonah muttered. They care about coin, not compassion. Then we'll pay, Ezra said. Pay with what? Rachel asked, her voice tight. We're not authorized to redirect trade goods. Ezra raised a hand. This is the border. We are the ambassadors. Our authority begins where the bureaucracy ends. He turned to Eve. Come with me. If Captain Trap won't move for credits or titles, maybe he'll move for truth. And if not, Eve asked. Ezra met her gaze. Then we'll move without him. The Trap compound sat like a polished coin in a bucket of bolts. Located at the far northern end of the Marinega Quarter, his estate was one of the only fully pressurized homes in the sector. It had actual hallways, walls and doors, not tarp dividers, filtered air that didn't hiss. His roof was real lunar glass, custom molded to bend the sun's arc, and his yard, yes, a yard, boasted hydro grass in tight, well-kept rows. He greeted them, shirtless. A silky button-down hung open over his shoulders, flapping lightly as he leaned against the outer gate. He was a large man, mid-40s maybe, with a shaven head, a dense lunar tan, and a smile made for closing deals. He wore fine boots, diamond-polished and grounded to lunar rock, and a gold tooth flashed whenever he said your name. Ezra, Naomi, Jonah, and the rest. Ah, the Glowbringers, he waved them through. Didn't think I'd be hosting missionaries in my sunroom this cycle. But, hey, Moon's full of surprises. You live well? Jonah muttered, eyes drifting to the solar array pulsing along the roofline. I live smart, Trap said. This town, it's boom and bust wrapped in plastic wrap. I saw it for what it was early. Got here first, bought the land, leased the pads, cut deals with the syndics and the suits. Now, everyone else's kid breathes pump-rationed O2, and mine wakes up to peppermint mist. Ezra crossed his arms. Your side of town is clean. The other side is choking. Then it's a good thing you came knocking, Trap said, gesturing them into a stone tile hallway. Inside, the air was dry and warm, actual humidity control, light refracted through textured panels along the ceiling, giving a simulated sunrise. He led them into a lounge carved into the hill itself. Walls were embedded with flecks of raw moonstone, glimmering like ice veins. Can I offer you anything? Trap asked. Real cocoa? Watermelon cubes? Earth coffee? It's all imported through honest means, of course. No, Ezra said. We came for the girl. Trap's smirk faded slightly. You're serious about this, then? The ventilators? We need more than one, Naomi said. Dr. Serafina believes this is a wave, not a single case. The children at Cheska Vale are falling into the same pattern. We don't have enough gear, and we don't have the time. Trap nodded slowly and crossed to a side console. He tapped a few keys. A star map illuminated, showing a slow rotation of orbital debris, labeled outposts and relay points. There's a case. 24 units. Nanovalves with long life filters. Earth Gen 7s. Top of the line. They're sitting in an old pharma container orbiting at 4,000 clicks. Been up there 5 years. Never claimed. Belonged to a med startup that went belly up during the Europa panic. Jonah stepped forward. So they're just floating? Technically, Trap grinned. They're mine. Bought the salvage claim off a Russian broker who didn't know what was inside. Got 3 weeks left before the permit expires and Luna Space reclassifies it as common drift. What do you want for it? Ezra asked. Trap walked to the center of the room and clapped his hands once. The floor lighting shifted red beneath his boots. I need birthrights. 3 months. Eden Orbital Station. I've got a shipyard job pending and no pad to land it. You give me docking access, I give you the case. You want Syndicate clearance? Naomi said, stunned. You know we don't sell property. I don't want to own it. I want to float in it for 90 days. I'll pay the service fees. I just need someone with pull to reserve the pad. Ezra considered. We can negotiate that with Shay and the motor pool elders, he said. But we'd need delivery. Fast. I can't bring the case here, Trap said. Not without someone verifying the cargo first. It's orbit locked. Magnetic seal. You need to meet me at the graveyard loop. 2 clicks from Eden Orbital. Low, safe orbit. Bring your hopper. You take the case from me, and you run it home. I'll swing wide and meet my shipyard. We'll both look good. Rachel stepped forward. We can do it. Micah and I will go. Ezra glanced at her. She was already calculating windback fuel ratios in her head. Micah gave a slow, steady nod. We're authorized, he said, and she'll need us to land in Chescavale anyway. Trap opened a drawer and tossed Rachel a fob. It gleamed silver and cold. Coordinates are on there. Be at the outer platform in 3 hours. I depart at 1500 sharp. You miss it, I'm gone. This is charity, not a habit. Ezra stepped forward and held out his hand. Trap shook it, firm. You're doing something good, he said, almost surprised. Feels weird being part of it. Don't get used to it, Ezra said. You're not the hero in this story. Trap grinned. I'm the delivery man, preacher, but I bring miracles. On time. The olive lamp shimmered like a polished arrow, its ceramic hull refracting sunlight as it cleared the final transit platform above Neighbor's Reach. Within minutes, the lunar surface fell away behind them, swallowed by the slow spin of space. Inside the cockpit, Micah and Rachel worked in silence, tension sitting between them like a third passenger. Thrusters primed, Micah said. ETA to the loop, 71 minutes. Plasma ring? Rachel asked. Green. We'll coast most of the way. Minimal burn. She gave a curt nod, but her fingers gripped the armrest harder than she needed to. Below them, the moon glowed like a ghost lantern. Above, the graveyard loop waited. They reached the ring at terminal dusk. The loop wasn't a place. It was a swarm. A slow spiral of abandoned satellites, expired cargo pods, and frozen hulls that still traced their final useless orbits. Somewhere within that cloud, Trap's ship, the Velvet Undertow, drifted quietly, its beacon flashing once every 20 seconds, like a heartbeat trying not to fade. Rachel leaned closer to the glass. There it is. Got it, Micah confirmed. He's already rotating to match our trajectory. A slow chime echoed. Incoming transmission. Uplink, Velvet Undertow. Trap's voice came through, smooth and clipped. Welcome to the loop, apostles. You're early. We don't do late, Rachel replied. Micah guided the lamp into a stabilizing orbit, aligning the docking port with the undertow's spine. The stars blurred and snapped still as their engines cut out. We're locked, he said. Cycling airlock. Inside the undertow, the ship smelled of coffee and solder. Narrow hallways lined with jump harnesses. A pair of half-repaired drones clung to the ceiling like spiders on break. Trap met them at the mid-bay. No crew in sight, wearing a gray flight vest and chewing on a bulb of dried lemon root. The crate's in the cargo spine, he said. Tethered, magnetic sealed. I pulled it from its cradle last night. He handed over a pad. Authenticate. Rachel scanned the manifest. Model 7 nanos. All present. Still chilled, too, Trap added. 5 years frozen. No corrosion. No mold drift. The kind of quality Earth used to make before they started filling lungs with patch foam. Micah walked the length of the hold, placing a reverent hand on the crate. 24 lives. Trap didn't respond for a moment. Then quietly. More, maybe, if you can get them into that mining camp in time. Rachel exhaled slowly. Can we tether it to the lamp manually? Not here, Trap said. I've got a retrieval arm, but no direct coupling on this crate. You'll have to suit up. EVA. Secure it yourself. Micah nodded. We've done worse. Trap tilted his head. Have you? EVA. Outside the hopper. The void was absolute. Rachel's breath came slow in her helmet. Her gloves gripped the edge of the storage clamp, magnetic boots humming gently across the undertow's plating. Below her, Earth burned like a blue fireball. Above her, the crate hovered in free drift between the two vessels, suspended by nothing but math and prayer. Micah's voice crackled in her ear. Line secure on my end. Copy, she said, approaching the crate. She reached forward, arms extended in the silence of eternity. The tethers snapped taut. A sudden pulse of inertia pulled her off balance, but she steadied, one hand clasping the edge of salvation. Got it, she whispered. Transfer complete. The crate settled into the olive lamp's rear bay. Rachel sealed the lock, chest still rising from the adrenaline. Micah pulled her into the cockpit without a word. No time for reflection yet. Trap's peeling off, he said. His orbital burns in 7 minutes. Rachel nodded, then turned toward the back of the ship. How fast can we get to Cheska Vale? Micah's jaw set. Fast enough. She laid a hand on the crate's edge. It was cold, silent, perfect. Then she closed her eyes and prayed. Lord, let this not be the last breath these children take. The stars blurred. The olive lamp screamed through the vacuum, carving a blazing arc around the curve of the moon. Inside the cabin, everything rattled. Joints, crates, teeth. Micah fought the controls like a man steering thunder. We're 5 minutes to intercept, he said. Neighbor's Reach is already rotating under us. If we don't deploy now, we'll overshoot the dome, Rachel finished. She was already at the crate, pulling back the lid, securing the final seal on the autonomous courier pod, a sealed drone about the size of a small coffin, covered in ceramic shielding and reflective heat foil. Inside, 24 ventilators hummed faintly in cryostorage, temperature barely holding as the ship's heat levels surged. We've got one shot, she muttered. One shallow window. No time for a second pass. Micah glanced at her. You sure it'll survive re-entry? Rachel looked up, sweat along her brow. I reinforced the struts, added a redundant nav puck, and I coded the descent manually. She paused, then added, I also named it. Micah raised an eyebrow. You named the drop crate? Rachel smirked. Yeah, Gabriel. Thought it sounded biblical. Micah laughed once, short, sharp, but real. Then let the messenger fly. The launch. They strapped the pod into the rear airlock cradle, tethered it to the drone rail, and powered up the drop booster. Micah counted down. Trajectory aligned. Dome marker confirmed. Ground beacon acquired. 3, 2, 1. The rear hatch split open like an iris, and Gabriel fell. No sound, no fire, just the silent flick of metal leaving its mother. The pod vanished against the stars, caught in a burning line that curved toward the far edge of the moon's visible hemisphere. In neighbor's reach, Eve was mid-prayer when the sky cracked. The dome's artificial daylight flickered slightly as atmospheric shielding adjusted. Overhead, the shimmer of falling ceramic streaked into view, silent, swift, aimed like prophecy. A whistle, a pause, and then... woof! The delivery drone struck the outer landing pad with pinpoint grace, skidding to a stop in a storm of moon dust. People rushed forward. Technicians, guards, children who had never seen anything fall from the heavens. Eve ran, barefoot, the hem of her robe fluttering. The drone's top shell hissed, then folded like a blossom. Cold air spilled into the dust. 24 ventilators glowing blue. In the cockpit, Rachel stared out the viewport, holding her breath. Visual confirmation received, said the Ark. Successful delivery, Micah added softly. Then he looked ahead. The moon was still turning. Beyond the gray ridge lay Cheska Vale, unseen, unknown. He reached for the throttle. Time to finish the route. The dust hadn't even settled when Jonah hit the tarmac in a full sprint. Behind him, a dozen volunteers from Neighbor's Reach followed, some in utility gear, others barefoot, still clutching kitchen towels or half-folded laundry. The entire dome was moving. At the far edge of the landing pad, Gabriel sat, half buried in moon grit, its heat shield still glowing at the seams. The crater it carved had torn through the soft gravel of the outer ring, right between the communal kitchen and the rail platform. Jonah reached it first. He dropped to his knees beside the pod and ran his palm along the top panel. The name was etched there, Gabriel, scrawled in grease pencil, barely legible under the thermal scars. Ezra arrived seconds later, breathless. Rachel? Confirmed delivery, Jonah said, pointing to the arc blinking on his wrist. They're already en route to Cheska Vale. Naomi pressed her hand to her mouth. We didn't ask for an angel, but we got one. The recovery. The pod hissed as the seal disengaged. The shell unfolded like petals, steam curling from the cryo valves. Inside, 24 ventilators blinked to life, one by one. Each was locked into a foam casing, pristine, untouched. Dr. Serafina appeared through the crowd, her white coat streaked with dust. Her eyes widened the moment she saw the controls. Every size, infant to preteen, she whispered. Exactly what we needed. Can you use them all today? Ezra asked. Serafina snapped out of her trance. No time to wait. I've got 4 confirmed cases and a dozen borderline symptoms. We'll triage here, then load the rest to bring deeper into the quarter. Jonah and Naomi stepped forward and grabbed the crate together. Jonah looked around. Get the cart. We walk it in. No truck. Ezra raised an eyebrow. Ceremonial? Jonah shook his head. Symbolic. Procession through the dome. What started as a recovery team became a caravan. They moved together, Ambassadors, doctors, builders, mothers, teens, half the bakery staff, pushing the ventilator crate on a floating handcart through the heart of Neighbors Reach. As they passed through the open atrium, people came out of homes and shops, whispering, "Is that it? The drop? Did it survive?" By the time they reached the clinic, nearly 300 people had gathered, forming a silent half-circle outside the doors. Serafina waved from the steps. "Inside, let's move." In the clinic, Amaya was still awake, barely. Serafina moved like a blur, pulling the smallest unit from the case, peeling the seal, and snapping it into calibration. She placed the device over the child's face, adjusted the strap, and waited. 1 beat, 2. Then the girl inhaled, deep, without a wheeze, without a fight. Her mother collapsed into tears. Amaya looked around, confused, then smiled. "Feels bigger," she whispered. Ezra knelt beside her. "That's because it is, little one. This whole world just made room for you." Outside the clinic, the crowd stood quiet. The dust had settled. The arc chimed softly with a new status. Ventilator case deployed. Recipient status stable. Estimated survival window extended. Rachel's message followed moments later, beamed from halfway to Cheska Vale. The drop worked. They called it Gabriel. Now, let's finish the mission. The clinic door eased shut behind them with a soft hiss, sealing out the cool hum of machinery and quiet sobs of joy echoing down the halls. Outside the square was nearly empty now. Most had returned to their homes or to prayer. The dust from the drone's landing had settled over the plaza like fine snow. Ezra, Naomi, and Jonah stood in the courtyard just past the water station, leaning on the edge of a sun-warmed planter wall. The artificial lights overhead dimmed slightly, simulating evening inside the dome. High above, earth hung fat and glowing. Jonah ran a hand through his hair, then wiped his dusty palm on his knee. "Well,